Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So I've got an esteemed panel here, which I'd like to introduce. And as I call your name, please come on the stage as well. So we've got Jehan Ara, who needs no introduction. She is the founder of Katalyst Lab and also 0 to 1 Disrupt. Then we've got Naureen Hyat from Tejas Financial. She is one of the leading fintechs in Pakistan. And then we've got Mr. Atyab Tahir, who is currently with MasterCard, but soon to be joining one of the largest payment platforms in Pakistan. So I'd like to start this panel off by introducing the crowd to a profound change that is happening and why technology suddenly is become in the center point of the world today. We're living in a time very similar to 1914 to 1945, between World War I and II, where you had the confluence of two major events happening, which was the a rising empire, the United States, challenging an existing empire, the United Kingdom, along with the industrial age disrupting the agrarian age, which was primarily composed of the landed class, the princely states, the feudals, and the monarchies. Post World War II, we ended up with the new barons of the industrial age that were the industrialists, most of the companies that we know today among the Fortune 500s and their predecessors. The same process started in the year 2000, where the technology and information age started disrupting the industrial age. And in 2020, we have finally attained the exponential stage of technology adoption. So the primary change that's happening here is that we're moving from a commodity-based monetary system to a digital-based monetary system, which is going to have profound effects on all of us. The very fundamental nature of every business, credit scoring mechanisms, how everyone interacts is going to be based on data. Data is the new oil. So I would say that every single person in this room over the coming decade will have at least 500 to 600 data points on them based on the digital footprint that they leave throughout their digital lives. The younger population, the millennials and Gen Zers, are going to face this, are even going to have more significant data points right from a young age. The reason why all this is important from a legal tech point of view is that AI is dependent on data as fuel to become more and more powerful with each coming year. I'll give you an example of how AI is training itself. The cost of training AI is reducing by 60% a year. So by the year 2030, AI will be creating other AI, which will disrupt most jobs in this room, along with probably in the industrial world, whether it's accounting, law, doctors, because anything that is logic-based can be done by AI with more efficiency. And so it's very important, this conference today, to create awareness in the room. And with that, I'd like to start asking questions from the panel. So I'll start off with Jehan Ara. One of the main things that I think with technology that we can accomplish is allowing disempowered individuals and people that are not necessarily included because of the current formats of systems, as we start to digitize courts. For example, in the US, a lot of motions can be submitted online, and then depositions as well as actual court appearances can be done via Zoom. So eventually, Pakistan, the same steps will play out, whether it takes 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years. How do you feel that'll impact women? We've seen this happen in health tech as well. So would love to get your point on this.
Thank you very much, Faisal. Yes, absolutely. I think technology is one of the things that has been extremely handy in terms of empowering women, because women have multiple roles to play in society. In the health tech industry, we've seen that a lot of doctors, women doctors who were not able to practice simply because they could not just abandon what they were doing in the community and for their families and practice medicine throughout the day. So the fact that now they can use technology to listen to their patients, to give advice, to collaborate with other medical practitioners, also to maybe have some health assistance, somebody who can then check blood pressures and temperatures and things like that, because sometimes all of that cannot be done remotely. That helps, I think. That has helped the health tech sector to grow. And although we haven't grown to the extent that we should in this country, we've seen how we've handled COVID, and I think the government overall has played a major role to make sure that people are able to use technology to do a lot during the 2 years that all of us were restricted from meeting face to face. So similarly, I think in the legal space, there are a lot of women who have studied law, but we don't see that number of women practicing law for several reasons. I think if you've been to the High Court or the provincial courts, I have had opportunity to do that. It's a scary place, in my opinion, because perhaps they are not treated with the kind of respect I feel that they deserve. They feel they don't belong. And you have to be really strong in order to be there. I mean, I come from a male-dominated industry myself, which is the technology industry, and I remember when I first started meeting up with other people in my industry, I was the one woman in a room full of 100 men. And no matter how strong you may feel you are, you feel awkward. You feel, do I really belong? The conversations are very different. And you are made to feel as if, you are sort of not as superior as the men who are practicing law, and all of us know that that's not true. Anything that women want to do, they do well. They make sure that maybe they sort of prepare themselves twice as much because they lack that confidence that is necessary for them to face the kind of things that they have to do on a day-to-day basis. So by having technology access and being able to give advice online, so I was just watching the video of Vakeel online, I think it's great. They will be able to give advice, they will be able to take on clients, they will be able to generate revenue for themselves, and actually then start hiring and making sure that there is a broader group of women who are practicing law together with them. We've seen this happen in the food industry, we've seen this happen with entrepreneurs who first started working from home and then had all the logistics and everything taken care of by technology. And now you see a lot of businesses that have grown, that have been able to employ other people. And we know that in a country like Pakistan, where not everybody can get a job, you need to create jobs. This is just going to be wonderful.
Thank you. Atyab, you're a part of a pretty major payments platform, and you're soon to join one of the largest payment platforms in Pakistan. I think one of the main components of Vakeel Online and similar platforms is going to be exchange of value and how people pay each other on these platforms. As we learned that they're going to exchange services from a lawyer and a client point of view, how do you see the role of payment platforms facilitating this particular field in general?
So look, first of all, I apologize. My voice is pretty hoarse. I was at the expo entertaining a few clients. So if I lose my voice in the middle,
I hope you weren't singing, Atyab.
What's that?
I said, I hope you weren't singing.
Well, I'm not going to talk about that. But look, financial inclusion, it's not just limited to legal services, right? And inclusion for us is a means. And when we talk about payments, if the primary function is to provide people access to services and not just exchange of value, then a platform like Vakeel Online or PakSign or others would have to have this payment embedded. And that's where we are pretty much today, where when we look at the world, people don't necessarily go out to pay for something. They want something done, and the payment has to happen as it should be embedded. And that's where I see platforms playing a role, where they would make the ability to pay and the ability to receive money so seamless that somebody could just log into a Vakeel online, have a conversation, and the payment happens in the end. Where it's important is that, when a person is not satisfied with the service, how do they ensure that they're getting value for money? And that's why platforms like Vakeel Online need to establish certain principles and certain guidelines by which the service providers need to be held accountable. And so I don't expect payment to be an impediment per se, but what I expect is the original access to financial services to be able to make that payment as a key impediment. That's what we sort of need to work on. When we look at Pakistan, we have 220 million people, 130 million adults, and only 20% have a bank account, right? And they still struggle to find ways to be able to get access to financial services. And if you go back to the example that Vakeel Online quoted in their video, a person who is domestically abused and who's not empowered most likely does not have access to financial services as freely either. So how do we ensure that a platform is able to provide her that service? Maybe she doesn't have the 500 rupees an hour to pay a lawyer, or maybe she doesn't have any money saved up. So for her to be able to borrow immediately as she's logging on to Vakeel Online and as she's making that, getting that service, we don't want money to be that impediment. The money should always be there, whether borrowed or through their own savings. It's about integrating it seamlessly into the delivery of a system, and not making, if she goes to a bank for a loan, for example, it would take her 10 days at least to get that loan approved. And if she needs help immediately, where her life is in danger or her kids are in danger, money should not be that impediment to get her that help. Same as with healthcare, same as with education, same as with energy inclusion, same as with food security. And justice is just one of the things that when we talk about inclusion, it's one of the ends that we talk about, because giving somebody money is just a means. Giving them that service and giving them the ability to live another day and protect themselves and protect their kids is what we should be focused on. And that's why the idea is that get this thought about whether I can afford it or not out of the system. It should always be prevalent. Focus on the objective.
Excellent. So, Naureen, since we're talking about fintech in the form of lending, I fought a case recently in the Sindh High Court, and so I realized that it can financially drain you very quickly. Luckily, I've had quite a bit of savings to take it on, but a lot of success in a case comes down to who has more money, and ultimately you can keep funding if you lawyers dependent on that. So, from your platform's point of view, how can you play a role in terms of actually assessing creditworthiness of a borrower that needs money for a case potentially? Is that something that would play into fintech at some point, especially from a lending point of view?
I see. I'm actually going to pick up on what Atyab was just mentioning. I think सबसे important चीज़ यहाँ ये है that while we're talking about credit, which is actually the next level of a financial service that has to be provided. Prior to that, it's actually opening a bank account. And 10 days, I still feel is a very optimistic number. One should actually ask a female, a common individual to come here on stage and ask her or him what their process has been to open a bank account. For females, it's much tougher. You actually require a male counterpart or even someone who actually can show you some form of income to be able to open a bank account. So when we talk about platforms like ourselves who are doing digital lending, it's important to understand what are the missing links when it comes to justice altogether. And we're talking about democratizing financial inclusion here. You can't look at it in parts. It has to be in whole. You know, I feel justice, while the parts make the whole, it's also important to understand what those parts entail. So one is the customer side, the other is the financial institution side. On the customer side, you know, the biggest issue why institutions, traditional institutions aren't serving them, and we're talking about credit now, either they don't have credible data, they don't have a credit history, and of course they won't because they don't even have a bank account to begin with. And you know, then they don't have collaterals. And institutions would only lend to them if they had all of these. Now, in the absence of data, institutions don't have risk rating tools that actually would help them understand whether or not a customer is, well, able or even willing. And I think the latter, which is willingness, is the tougher area to analyze, because you usually don't have data on it. So what we do is, in order to democratize inclusion and access to credit, we are basing our analysis on the single most prevalent piece of infrastructure, which is a smartphone. And you know, that is something that everyone, most of the people, like 80% of the population at least, has access to. And as you know, at the start of the panel mentioned, the data points that are available through it, the smartphone actually gives you an entire footprint, whether it's, you know, your geographic footprint, your financial footprint, your socio-demographic, or even behavioral footprint. We have actually developed algorithms which are based on data science to analyze behavior. Now, that's input. The data is the input. How you actually understand that data is it's the work of technology. And you know, as you said, yes, the cost of AI is going down with time, but AI is literally garbage in, garbage out. What you feed into it, it'll only spit out results according to it. That's the same with credit. So, you know, over time, what we've seen is, well, the single biggest challenge with credit is actually defaults. And, you know, we've had this conversation with multiple people saying, yeah, ye to default kar jayega. To begin with, isko access hi na de. I think the challenge with us as a society is complacency. If there is a problem, we need to learn to challenge and overcome it rather than deter from it. And that's exactly what we're trying to do in providing credit. And so, you know, we've actually seen how we've actually managed to bring down defaults from when we started from 50% to now under 3%. Now, when you talk about, of course, you know, it's not only applicable to lawyers, but anyone who does not have access to finance, they can just come, download an app, provide access to their data, which right now is only limited to smartphones. But as we talk about open banking, access to more sources of data, and of course, responsible usage of that data. And then, you know, you provide credit to them based on how they've actually interacted with their journeys through data.
So some quick data points for everyone in the room. Another reason why everything is accelerating so rapidly in Pakistan is that when you look at this region around us, India, other comparable markets, India, Southeast Asia, MENA, unlike everybody launched 3G and 4G in 2006 and 2011. And 3G and 4G data connectivity is very important for smartphone adoption, because in frontier market countries like Pakistan, affordability of laptops and desktops is just really not there because of the price sensitivity. So it's really these 10, 15, 20,000 rupee mobile phones that tend to create adoption. Pakistan today, when you fast forward, we actually did the auction in 2015, 13 for the license, and true adoption started in 14 and 15. When you look at Pakistan after that, I mean, literally it's about 750,000 smartphone connections a month are coming online. We are now we were about at roughly 15 to 18 million active internet users in 2015. That number sits at roughly around 75 to 76 million active users, with about 100 million overall data users. That's actually bigger than the size of Egypt, just our data users. So we're a pretty big economy, very powerful economy in terms of the tech world, and I think you're going to see more and more adoption in Pakistan, and more capital continue to flow. And so the reason why I bring that up is that this is not going to, the tech moves at a 15x velocity to brick and mortar. So as the pace of disruption is going to be the equivalent of the last 30 years, compressed in effectively 7 to 10 years. So this is right around the corner. And I think no matter what we're doing, it is going to touch us at some point. With that, I'd like to give parting thoughts to each one of you, just to share with the audience of how you feel the next 3 to 5 years are going to play out for Pakistan in general on the digital front, and potentially to different fields, even legal tech.
So I think with the increased usage of technology, I think we're still not there. Maybe we are looking at data for Karachi, Lahore, Islamabad, and maybe Faisalabad, some parts of Hyderabad, but we have a large country where technology adoption still has to happen. And I believe that smartphone usage will only increase when you have, faster bandwidth. I was talking to someone in Jamshoro, and the bandwidth was not sufficient for us to have a proper conversation. So I think we need to make sure that the bandwidth is faster, that smartphones are cheaper, and that people are educated on the use of digital technology. So platforms like legal tech, anything to do with legal tech, are important, because I think a lot of us need to also be educated on what the law means and how we can access law, how we can, if we are facing a particular problem, what does it mean? Who can we reach out to? How does the law tackle those things? Simple things, like when my parents passed away and I had to get the documentation done for the property that they left behind, it was so difficult. Finding a lawyer, making sure that the lawyer was not taking me for a ride. Finally, I was lucky enough because I had I'm sorry to say this, there are a lot of lawyers in this room, but if we don't know you personally, we don't know. And I was lucky enough to have a friend who was a lawyer, and although she did not deal in cases such as these, she introduced me to someone. But even then, it took forever for the transfer of the property to happen. And with my siblings being in different parts of the world, it was even more difficult. So I think, property, especially women and also men, when they have problems such as these, if the solutions are available online, if they can find out what the process should be, who to go to, what it means for them, then I think it gets a lot easier for us to get justice. And this is just one case of property law. There, we heard about the custody cases. There are many more that we need to look at. And so if every citizen is going to learn about this, there should be video content, and that's so easy to do now with phones. You can just build content, put it up, and say, okay, if you are facing this issue, this is what you need to do. We saw some great content by senior lawyers who are educating law students. But similarly, I'm sure there is content that is going to go up on multiple platforms which will tell citizens how to go about accessing the law, what to do if they face a certain, case studies of things that they may face and how to go about solving those problems. So I think there's a lot that technology can do. I'm a big believer in the use of technology by community, by every person in this country, and we have such a young population. There is no reason that we should not be able to educate them to use technology for their own benefit. And this means outside KLI as well. That means around the country. And I'm sort of very optimistic that we can make that happen if all of us work collectively to do that.
So if I am to restrict myself to primarily financial inclusion and the legal tech space, with the growing needs of this particular sector, we see, the regulators are coming in with new regulations every second day. We see their new financial services being innovated every second day. And as the customer is becoming more informed, they're becoming fraud savvy as well with time. So I think the next years to follow Well, I think the biggest issue for me is the cost of adoption of technology is very high. And until and unless we don't address this particular area, it's going to be very difficult to actually get technology implemented, till the very fabric of this particular ecosystem. So, we see in our particular areas, within risk management, for example, legal tech is playing a critical role. With FATF and AML compliance requirements, we see on a daily basis, we have to literally address requirements, of 100 emails a day sometimes, So that's where legal tech can play a critical role. But I see, without, subjective judgment of being a little critical, I think one of the biggest challenges here is that most of the legislators, or even the regulatory bodies, as supportive as they are right now, they come from an age where the internet wasn't even, introduced. So I'd say they're an offline generation. And now, when we're talking about fintech and the role of fintech and inclusion, it would be fair to say that they have limited understanding of the new technology that's coming forth. So while it'll be great to actually create innovations, its implementation in its complete form with the right legislation is going to be very important. And for example, for us, one of the biggest issues is that of eKYC. We see the State Bank has come up with regulations, for digital onboarding. And we do see, there are innovations coming in with banks where they're, allowing for in-app biometric verifications. But, that's still a challenge. You still require, individuals to go to banks, fill in documents. That's an arduous process, until and unless you don't address the customer journey. I think the inclusion aspect is not going to be addressed. And this is, again, where I think technology can play a major role. You talk about, we saw Park sign digital contracts, for someone like us, where we're in the business of giving credit, that's imperative. We've actually seen with the cyber crime unit, it's been such a challenge being able to even recover a loan. We had to actually let go of it at times, So I think these are areas where technology can play a major role when it comes to inclusion and inclusion for justice. It's not only about access, it's also about responsible use. But I think one area that we tend to forget is that of customer client protection. And while we are talking about, justice for ourselves as institutions, it's very important to understand that at the end of the day, the customer is the one. Well, if, at most times, the customer is not bad, and in areas of financial services and lending, that's an assumption that's usually taken forth. So I think technology can really help address these challenges and help us be more inclusive.
So I'm, in the interest of time, I'm going to sort of focus on two things: data protection and cybersecurity. And I think those are the two areas where legal tech is yet to catch up to the criminals who are going after unprotected data and who are manipulating cybersecurity for organizations and individuals, right? And that's where any future legal entrepreneurs that are in the room, I would like them to focus on, because that is the next big frontier for Pakistan. Pakistan is one hack away from becoming a joke in the world when it comes to cash manipulation or customer manipulation or data manipulation. So with the legal experts in the room, I think that's the one advice or one request I would put forward, is that we need to start focusing on how we build our jurisprudence around data protection. How do we sort of take this new MOITT bill on data protection and interpret it for corporates in a way that that can be helpful for them, and at the same time help them get ahead of this cybersecurity problem. And those are the two areas that I think we should immediately focus on.
Thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure having you here. Thanks.
Thank you.